Imagine this. You're scrolling through your phone at 7 a.m., already dreading the day ahead. Your boss has been impossible lately, your commute is a nightmare, and you just know something's going to go wrong. Most people would tell you to think positive or manifest good vibes. But what if I told you that one of history's most powerful leaders did the exact opposite every single morning? Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled the most powerful empire in the world, started each day by deliberately imagining all the difficult, annoying, and downright awful people he was going to encounter. And he wasn't alone. Ancient Stoic philosophers had a secret weapon that modern self-help gurus completely miss. They used strategic pessimism to build unshakable inner peace. This isn't about being negative or expecting the worst out of life. This is about something the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, which basically means preparing your mind for reality instead of living in a fantasy. While everyone else gets blindsided by life's inevitable challenges, you'll be ready for anything. Think about the last time someone cut you off in traffic, or your coworker threw you under the bus, or your flight got delayed. Did you feel that surge of anger and frustration? That's what happens when we expect life to be smooth and perfect. But what if you could train your mind to stay calm no matter what chaos erupts around you? The Stoics figured out something that modern psychology is just now catching up to. When you mentally prepare for difficulties, you don't just survive them, you actually become stronger. It's like building mental armor that protects you from the emotional damage that destroys most people's peace of mind. This ancient practice isn't about becoming pessimistic or cynical. It's about becoming realistic and resilient. When you know that difficult people exist, traffic jams happen, and plans fall through, you're not shocked when they actually occur. Instead, you're prepared, calm, and ready to handle whatever comes your way. The two masters of this technique approached it differently, but both achieved the same result: unshakable tranquility in the face of life's storms. Marcus Aurelius focused on preparing for difficult people, while Epictetus developed a method for handling everyday chaos and inconvenience. What makes this so powerful is that it works immediately. You don't need years of meditation or expensive therapy sessions. You just need to understand how your mind works and use this simple but profound technique that's been tested by some of history's wisest people. But how exactly did the emperor put this into practice every single morning? 1. Marcus Aurelius' morning routine for difficult people. Every morning before dawn, while the Roman Empire slept, the most powerful man in the world would sit quietly and prepare his mind for battle. Not the kind of battle you'd expect from an emperor. Marcus Aurelius wasn't planning military campaigns. He was preparing for something far more challenging: dealing with difficult people. In his personal journal, which we now call Meditations, Marcus wrote down his morning routine. And it's nothing like the positive affirmations you see on Instagram. Here's exactly what he told himself every single day. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They're like this because they can't tell good from evil. Now, if you read that on social media today, people would call Marcus Aurelius toxic or negative. But here's the thing, he was running an empire, dealing with senators, generals, and citizens who all wanted something from him. He knew from experience that sugarcoating reality wouldn't help him stay calm when someone inevitably tried to manipulate, betray, or frustrate him. Think about your own life. Whether you're dealing with that coworker who takes credit for your ideas, the neighbor who plays music too loud, or the customer service rep who seems determined to ruin your day, Marcus Aurelius was dealing with the ancient versions of these same people. The faces change, but human nature stays remarkably consistent. But here's where it gets interesting. Marcus wasn't just complaining or being cynical. He was doing something much smarter. By acknowledging that difficult people exist and that he'd probably encounter them, he was removing the element of surprise that usually triggers our anger and frustration. Picture Sarah, a marketing manager in Chicago. She used to get completely derailed when her boss would micromanage her projects or when clients would make unreasonable demands. But after learning Marcus Aurelius' morning routine, she started each day by quietly acknowledging, "Today, I might deal with people who are stressed, unreasonable, or just having a bad day." The result? When her boss did micromanage or clients did make crazy requests, Sarah wasn't shocked or angry. She was prepared. Marcus understood something crucial about human psychology. We get most upset when reality doesn't match our expectations. If you expect everyone to be reasonable, kind, and considerate, you're setting yourself up for constant disappointment and anger. But if you expect some people to be difficult, not because you're pessimistic, but because you're realistic, then you can handle them with grace instead of rage. But Marcus didn't stop there. The second part of his morning meditation reveals the real genius of this practice. "But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own, not of the same blood or birth, but the same mind, and possessing a share of the divine. And so none of them can hurt me." This is where Marcus transforms from just being prepared to being truly wise. He's not just expecting difficult people, he's understanding why they're difficult. In his view, people who act badly are acting against their own nature. They're not evil monsters, they're confused human beings who don't understand what's truly good for them. Think about that coworker who's always gossiping and creating drama. Marcus would say they're not trying to hurt you personally, they're just confused about what actually makes life meaningful. They think stirring up conflict will somehow make them happier or more important, but they're wrong. Understanding this doesn't excuse their behavior, but it helps you respond with wisdom instead of anger. Marcus believed that all humans are connected, that we're supposed to work together, not against each other. So when someone acts against this natural cooperation, when they're selfish, dishonest, or cruel, they're actually working against their own best interests. They're like someone who keeps hitting themselves and wondering why they're in pain. This perspective is incredibly liberating. Instead of taking difficult behavior personally, you can see it for what it really is, someone else's confusion and ignorance. And here's the key insight that Marcus discovered: none of them can hurt me. They can't actually damage your inner peace unless you let them. Let's say you're stuck in a meeting with that one person who always has to be right, who interrupts everyone, and who seems to suck the energy out of the room. The old you might leave that meeting feeling frustrated, angry, and drained. But if you've prepared like Marcus Aurelius, you walk in knowing that you might encounter someone who's confused about how to interact with others. When they inevitably interrupt or dominate the conversation, you're not surprised or angry, you're just witnessing someone who hasn't figured out how to be truly effective with people. Marcus wrote, "There's no point in being angry at people that don't know any better. In this case, anger is just another obstruction." Think about that. Your anger doesn't change them or improve the situation, it just makes you miserable and less effective. The emperor understood that we can't control other people's actions, attitudes, or decisions. But we can absolutely control our own responses. We can choose to stay calm, compassionate, and focused on what we can actually influence, our own thoughts, feelings, and actions. This isn't about becoming a pushover or accepting bad behavior. It's about responding from a place of strength and wisdom instead of emotional reactivity. When you're not caught off guard by difficult people, you can actually handle them more effectively because you're thinking clearly instead of just reacting emotionally. While Marcus focused on preparing for difficult people, another Stoic master developed a completely different method for handling everyday chaos that's equally transformative. 2. How Epictetus prepared for everyday chaos. While Marcus Aurelius was dealing with senators and generals, another Stoic philosopher was facing a completely different kind of challenge. Epictetus had been born a slave, and even after gaining his freedom, he understood what it was like to navigate a world where you have very little control over your circumstances. His approach to mental preparation wasn't about difficult people. It was about the everyday chaos that can derail anyone's peace of mind. Epictetus developed what might be the most practical piece of advice for modern life. Here's exactly what he recommended. When you are going about any action, remind yourself what nature the action is. If you are going to bathe, picture to yourself the things which usually happen in the bath. Some people splash the water, some push, some use abusive language, and others steal. Thus, you will more safely go about this action if you say to yourself, "I will now go bathe, and keep my own mind in a state conformable to nature." Now, you might be thinking, a bath? Really? But remember, in ancient Rome, public baths were like our modern gyms, coffee shops, and subway systems all rolled into one. They were crowded, chaotic places where all kinds of people gathered, and anything could happen. Let's translate this to your life. Imagine you're about to head to the gym in Manhattan. Instead of just grabbing your workout clothes and hoping for the best, Epictetus would tell you to spend 30 seconds mentally preparing. I'm going to the gym. There might be people who don't re-rack their weights. Someone might be hogging the equipment I need. The locker room might be a mess. And that one guy might be grunting way too loudly. This isn't being negative. It's being realistic. And here's what happens when you prepare this way. When you walk into the gym and someone is indeed curling in the squat rack, you're not immediately annoyed. You expected it. You're mentally prepared to work around it and stay focused on your own workout. Take Jessica, a software developer in Seattle. She used to get incredibly frustrated during her daily commute on public transportation. People would be loud on their phones, someone would always have their music too loud, and there was always that one person eating something that smelled terrible. But after learning Epictetus' method, she started preparing mentally before each commute. I'm getting on the bus. People will be talking, eating, and doing their own thing. Some might be inconsiderate, but that's just the nature of shared public space. The transformation was immediate. Instead of spending her commute getting increasingly irritated, Jessica could actually use that time productively, reading, listening to podcasts, or just observing the city. The same annoying behaviors were still happening around her, but they weren't ruining her mood anymore because she expected them. Epictetus called this keeping your mind in a state conformable to nature. What he meant was understanding the true nature of any situation you're entering. A crowded coffee shop during morning rush hour is naturally going to be hectic. A popular restaurant on Friday night is naturally going to be busy and loud. The DMV is naturally going to involve waiting and bureaucracy. When we ignore the nature of these situations and expect them to be different than they are, we set ourselves up for frustration. But when we acknowledge their true nature beforehand, we can navigate them with much more grace and effectiveness. Here's where Epictetus gets really practical. He says that when obstacles inevitably arise, you should be ready with this mindset. It was not only to bathe that I desired, but to keep my mind in a state conformable to nature. And I will not keep it if I am bothered at things that happen. Let's say you're trying to get work done at a coffee shop in Los Angeles, and construction starts up right outside. The old you might get frustrated, pack up angrily, and let it ruin your whole morning. But if you've prepared like Epictetus taught, you'd think, I came here to work, but I also came here to practice maintaining my peace of mind regardless of circumstances. This noise is just part of the urban environment. I can either adapt or find another solution, but I won't let it destroy my inner calm. This approach works for everything. Going to the grocery store? Expect long lines, empty shelves for that one thing you need, and maybe a crying child somewhere in the store. Flying somewhere? Expect delays, crowds, and that person who reclines their seat all the way back. Having dinner with extended family? Expect someone to bring up politics, ask uncomfortable questions about your personal life, or make that comment they always make. The genius of Epictetus' method is that it works immediately and requires no special skills or training. You just need to spend a few seconds before any activity asking yourself, what's the nature of this situation? What typically happens here? How can I prepare my mind to handle whatever comes up? Mike, a sales manager in Dallas, started using this technique before client meetings. Instead of hoping each meeting would go perfectly, he'd spend a minute preparing. This client might be running late. They might have concerns I haven't anticipated, or they might be having a bad day for reasons that have nothing to do with me. This simple preparation helped him stay calm and professional even when meetings didn't go according to plan, which actually improved his success rate because clients could sense his unshakable composure. But here's what makes this really powerful. Epictetus isn't just teaching you to expect problems. He's teaching you to maintain your inner stability regardless of external chaos. The goal isn't to become cynical or pessimistic. The goal is to become unshakable. Think about water flowing around rocks in a stream. The water doesn't get angry at the rocks or try to fight them. It simply flows around them and continues on its path. That's what Epictetus is teaching you to do with life's inevitable obstacles and inconveniences. The key insight here is that most of our daily stress doesn't come from major life events. It comes from the accumulation of small frustrations and unexpected inconveniences. Traffic jams, long lines, rude service, technology glitches, other people's bad moods. These things happen every single day, but we act surprised every time they occur. Epictetus realized that if you can mentally prepare for these everyday disruptions, you can maintain your peace of mind throughout the entire day. Instead of being constantly reactive to whatever chaos erupts around you, you become proactive about protecting your inner calm. This practice also reveals something profound about the nature of control. You can't control whether construction starts outside your coffee shop, but you can control how you respond to it. You can't control whether someone cuts in line at the store, but you can control whether you let it ruin your mood. You can't control flight delays, but you can control whether you spend that extra time being miserable or finding something productive or enjoyable to do. These practices might sound simple, but the psychological benefits are profound and scientifically measurable. The first benefit, never panic again. The Stoic coping method. The first way this changes your brain is remarkable. It transforms you from someone who reacts to crises into someone who responds to them. There's a huge difference between reacting and responding, and understanding this difference might be the most valuable skill you can develop in our unpredictable world. When you react, you're operating from your emotional brain, the part that triggers fight or flight responses, floods your system with stress hormones, and makes you feel like you're in immediate danger even when you're just stuck in traffic. When you respond, you're operating from your rational brain, the part that can assess situations calmly, consider options, and choose the most effective course of action. The Stoic coping method works by giving your rational brain a head start. Instead of being blindsided by difficulties and having to figure out what to do while you're already stressed, you've already done the mental work ahead of time. You've visualized the scenario, considered your options, and prepared your mind to handle whatever comes up. Let's look at how this works in real life. David, a financial advisor in New York, used to completely fall apart whenever the stock market had a bad day. His clients would call panicking, his own investments would drop, and he'd spend the entire day in a state of anxiety that made him useless to everyone, including himself. But after learning about negative visualization, David started each week by mentally preparing for market volatility. This week, the market might drop significantly. Some clients will panic and want to make emotional decisions. I might see my own portfolio lose value temporarily. This is just the nature of financial markets. They go up and down. The next time the market crashed, something amazing happened. While other advisors were stressed and reactive, David was calm and effective. He'd already mentally rehearsed this scenario, so instead of panicking, he was able to reassure his clients, provide rational guidance, and even see opportunities that others missed because they were too emotional to think clearly. This is what the Stoics understood about coping. Preparation is more powerful than reaction. When you've already visualized losing your job, you're not devastated when layoffs happen. You're ready to implement the plan you've already thought through. When you've mentally prepared for your relationship to have challenges, you don't panic at the first sign of conflict. You respond with the wisdom and patience you've already cultivated. But here's what makes this really powerful. The Stoic coping method doesn't just help you handle big crises, it transforms how you deal with everyday frustrations that can accumulate and destroy your peace of mind. Think about Sarah, a teacher in Chicago who used to let small classroom disruptions completely derail her lessons. One student acting out could ruin her entire day and leave her feeling like a failure. But after implementing negative visualization, she started each school day by mentally preparing. Today, at least one student might be having a difficult day, someone might forget their homework, and there might be unexpected interruptions. This is just the nature of working with kids. The transformation was immediate. When disruptions happened, Sarah wasn't thrown off course because she'd already mentally prepared for them. Instead of getting flustered and losing control of her classroom, she could calmly redirect the situation and keep her lesson on track. Her students noticed the change too. They responded better to a teacher who was unshakable rather than one who got visibly stressed by minor problems. The Stoics realized that most of our suffering doesn't come from the actual events in our lives. It comes from the gap between what we expected to happen and what actually happened. When you expect your commute to be smooth and it's full of traffic, you suffer. When you expect your coworker to be reasonable and they're difficult, you suffer. When you expect technology to work perfectly and it glitches, you suffer. But when you mentally prepare for these possibilities ahead of time, you eliminate that gap. Traffic becomes just traffic, not a personal attack on your schedule. Difficult coworkers become just part of the workplace landscape, not a source of constant frustration. Technology problems become minor inconveniences to solve, not catastrophes that ruin your day. This is why the Stoic coping method is so effective for anxiety. Most anxiety comes from uncertainty. We're afraid of what might happen because we haven't prepared for it mentally. But when you've already visualized potential difficulties and thought through how you'd handle them, uncertainty becomes much less threatening. Consider the difference between two people facing a job interview. Person A hopes everything will go perfectly, expects to be asked easy questions, and assumes they'll make a great impression. Person B mentally prepares for challenging questions, technical difficulties, and the possibility that the interviewer might be having a bad day. When the interview doesn't go perfectly, which most don't, Person A is thrown off and performs poorly. Person B stays calm and adapts because they expected some challenges. The Stoics also understood that this kind of mental preparation actually makes you more effective, not just calmer. When you're not surprised by difficulties, you can focus your energy on solving them rather than just emotionally reacting to them. You become the person others turn to in a crisis because you're the one who stays calm and thinks clearly when everyone else is panicking. But there's an important balance here. The goal isn't to become pessimistic or to expect the worst in every situation. The goal is to become realistic about the nature of life and prepared for its inevitable challenges. As Seneca, another Stoic philosopher, put it, what is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. This means that moderate preparation for difficulties actually reduces their impact when they occur. It's like the difference between a boxer who's trained for different fighting styles versus one who's only prepared for opponents to fight exactly like they do. The prepared boxer isn't pessimistic, they're realistic about the variety of challenges they might face. The practical application is simple but profound. Before any important situation, a meeting, a trip, a conversation, a project, spend a few minutes mentally preparing for things that might not go according to plan. Don't obsess over every possible problem, but acknowledge the most likely difficulties and think through how you'd handle them. This mental rehearsal does something amazing to your brain. It activates the same neural pathways you'd use in the actual situation, essentially giving you practice before you need it. Athletes use this technique all the time. They visualize different scenarios they might face in competition, so they're prepared for whatever happens. The result is that you become genuinely unshakable. Not because nothing bad ever happens to you, but because you're prepared for whatever does happen. You develop what the Stoics called the discipline of desire, the ability to remain calm and effective regardless of circumstances. This coping ability transforms every area of your life, but it's just the beginning of what negative visualization can do for your mental health. The second benefit, the mindset shift that changes everything. The second way negative visualization transforms your life is even more profound than the first. It completely changes how you interpret events. This isn't just about staying calm during difficulties, it's about fundamentally rewiring how your brain processes everything that happens to you. Here's what most people don't understand about emotions. They're not caused by events themselves, but by the stories we tell ourselves about those events. Two people can experience the exact same situation and have completely different emotional responses based on how they interpret what happened. The Stoics figured this out over 2,000 years ago, and modern neuroscience has proven they were absolutely right. Think about getting stuck in traffic. The traffic itself is just cars moving slowly, it's completely neutral. But your emotional response depends entirely on the story you tell yourself about it. If you think, this is ruining my day, I'm going to be late, this always happens to me, you'll feel frustrated and stressed. If you think, this is just part of city life, I can use this time to listen to a podcast or just relax, you'll feel calm or even grateful for the unexpected break. The genius of negative visualization is that it helps you rewrite these internal stories before you need them. Instead of seeing unexpected events as personal attacks or catastrophes, you start seeing them as natural parts of life that you've already prepared for mentally. Let me tell you about Jennifer, a real estate agent in Los Angeles who used to get completely derailed whenever a deal fell through. She'd take it personally, assume she'd done something wrong, and spend days feeling like a failure. But after learning about perspective shifting, she started each month by mentally preparing. Some deals will fall through this month. That's just the nature of real estate. People change their minds, financing falls through, inspections reveal problems. This doesn't mean I'm bad at my job, it means I'm working in an industry where uncertainty is normal. The next time a deal collapsed, something remarkable happened. Instead of spiraling into self-doubt and frustration, Jennifer thought, there it is, the deal falling through that I knew might happen this month. She was able to immediately shift her focus to her other clients and even learned valuable lessons from what went wrong that made her better at her job. This is what the Stoics called seeing things according to nature. Instead of imposing your own expectations and preferences onto reality, you start seeing situations for what they actually are. A delayed flight isn't a personal insult, it's just the nature of air travel in a complex system with weather, mechanical issues, and human factors. A difficult customer isn't trying to ruin your day, they're just someone who's stressed, confused, or having problems you know nothing about. But here's where this gets really powerful. When you change your interpretation of events, you literally change your brain chemistry. The stress hormones that flood your system when you see something as a threat don't get released when you see the same thing as a normal part of life. Your heart rate stays stable, your thinking remains clear, and your immune system doesn't get suppressed by chronic stress responses. Dr. Martin Seligman's research on explanatory style shows that people who interpret setbacks as temporary, specific, and external rather than permanent, pervasive, and personal are significantly less likely to develop depression and anxiety. The Stoics were teaching this exact principle centuries before modern psychology discovered it. Consider two people who both get rejected for a job they wanted. Person A thinks, I'm not good enough, I'll never find a good job, there's something wrong with me. Person B thinks, that particular job wasn't the right fit, there are other opportunities out there, and the company probably had specific needs I didn't match. Same event, completely different interpretations, totally different emotional outcomes. Negative visualization helps you develop person B's perspective automatically. When you've mentally prepared for job rejections as a normal part of the job search process, you don't take them personally or see them as evidence that you're inadequate. You see them as data points in a larger process that you're navigating skillfully. This perspective shift works for everything. Social media can be a perfect example. Most people scroll through Instagram or Facebook and feel worse about their lives because they're comparing their behind-the-scenes reality to everyone else's highlight reel. But if you've mentally prepared for social media to be a curated, unrealistic representation of people's lives, you can scroll through it without feeling inadequate or jealous. Marcus, a graphic designer in Seattle, used to feel terrible after checking social media because it seemed like everyone else was more successful, happier, and living better lives than he was. But after implementing perspective shifting, he started each social media session by reminding himself, I'm about to see carefully selected moments from people's lives, filtered and edited to look as good as possible. This isn't reality, it's performance. The same posts that used to make him feel inadequate now just seemed like what they actually were, marketing. The Stoics understood that most of our emotional suffering comes from fighting against the nature of reality. We want people to always be reasonable, weather to always be perfect, technology to never glitch, and life to always go according to our plans. But that's not how reality works, and the more we insist it should be different, the more we suffer. When you practice negative visualization regularly, you start accepting the true nature of things instead of demanding they be different. This doesn't make you passive or resigned, it makes you incredibly effective because you're working with reality instead of against it. Think about the difference between a surfer and someone who's never been in the ocean. When a big wave comes, the inexperienced person fights against it, gets tumbled around, and probably gets hurt. the experienced surfer sees the same wave and thinks, there's the wave I've been preparing for. They use its energy to their advantage and ride it skillfully. That's what perspective shifting does for your life. Instead of being tumbled around by every unexpected event, you start seeing them as waves you can navigate skillfully. You stop asking, why is this happening to me, and start asking, how can I handle this effectively? This shift also makes you much more resilient to other people's moods and behaviors. When you understand that someone's rudeness probably has nothing to do with you and everything to do with their own stress or confusion, you don't take it personally. When you expect some people to be having bad days, you can respond with compassion instead of defensiveness. Lisa, a nurse in Miami, used to go home emotionally drained because she took every patient's complaints and difficult behavior personally. But after learning to shift her perspective, she started each shift by mentally preparing. Some patients will be scared, in pain, or frustrated today. This isn't about me, it's about what they're going through. This simple shift allowed her to provide better care because she wasn't getting emotionally reactive to behaviors that were really just expressions of fear and discomfort. The practical application is straightforward but requires consistent practice. Throughout your day, when something doesn't go according to plan, pause and ask yourself, what's the nature of this situation? Is this actually unusual, or is this just how life works? Most of the time, you'll realize that what felt like a personal attack or catastrophe is actually just normal life being normal life. This perspective shift creates a foundation of unshakable peace, but there's an even deeper level of wisdom that comes from understanding your relationship with the things and people you care about most. The third benefit, love without being destroyed. The third benefit of negative visualization might be the most important one for your long-term happiness. It teaches you how to love people and enjoy things without being destroyed when they're gone. This isn't about becoming cold or detached, it's about loving more deeply and authentically by accepting the temporary nature of everything in your life. Most people love conditionally without realizing it. They love their partner assuming they'll never leave, they enjoy their job assuming it's permanent, they cherish their health assuming it will last forever. But this kind of love is actually fragile because it's based on the illusion of permanence. When reality inevitably changes, and it always does, they're devastated not just by the loss, but by the shattering of their fundamental assumptions about how life works. The Stoics understood something profound about attachment. The tighter you grip something, the more it hurts when it slips through your fingers. But when you hold things lightly, appreciating them fully while acknowledging their temporary nature, you can love them completely without being destroyed when they change or disappear. Epictetus put it perfectly, never say of anything, I have lost it, but I have returned it. This isn't just a clever way of thinking about loss, it's a complete reframing of ownership and attachment that can transform how you experience every relationship and possession in your life. Think about what this means practically. When you truly understand that your job, your health, your relationships, and even your life itself are temporary gifts rather than permanent possessions, you stop taking them for granted. You appreciate them more deeply because you know they won't last forever. But you also don't live in constant fear of losing them because you've already accepted that loss is part of the natural order. Consider Rachel, a marketing executive in Boston who used to be constantly anxious about her relationship. She'd analyze every text message, worry about every small disagreement, and live in fear that her boyfriend would leave her. This anxiety was actually damaging the relationship because her constant need for reassurance was exhausting for both of them. But after learning about healthy detachment, Rachel started practicing a simple mental exercise. Each morning, she'd quietly acknowledge, I'm grateful for this relationship today. I don't know how long it will last, no one does, but I can love fully and appreciate what we have right now. This shift was transformative. Instead of clinging desperately to the relationship out of fear, she was able to be present and authentic. Paradoxically, this made the relationship stronger because she was no longer needy or anxious. She was genuinely appreciating her partner rather than trying to control the future. This principle applies to everything you care about. Your career, your home, your possessions, your health, your family relationships, all of these are temporary. This isn't a depressing thought, it's a liberating one. When you accept impermanence, you stop wasting energy trying to make temporary things permanent, and you start fully appreciating them while they're here. The Stoics practiced this through regular reflection on loss. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself that he could lose his position as emperor, his health, or his loved ones at any time. But he wasn't doing this to make himself miserable, he was doing it to appreciate these things more fully and to prepare himself mentally for the natural changes that life brings. Modern psychology has discovered that this kind of thinking actually increases gratitude and life satisfaction. When you regularly contemplate the temporary nature of good things in your life, you appreciate them more deeply when they're present. It's like the difference between someone who's never been hungry appreciating a meal versus someone who's experienced real hunger. The person who understands scarcity appreciates abundance much more fully. But here's where this gets really practical. Healthy detachment makes you much more effective in relationships and at work because you're not operating from a place of desperate need. When you're not terrified of losing your job, you can take appropriate risks, speak up when necessary, and focus on doing excellent work rather than just trying to avoid being fired. When you're not desperately clinging to a relationship, you can be authentic, set healthy boundaries, and actually be the kind of person someone wants to be with. Take Michael, a sales manager in Denver who used to be paralyzed by the fear of losing major clients. He'd agree to unreasonable demands, work ridiculous hours, and compromise his company's interests just to avoid any conflict that might cause a client to leave. But after learning about detachment, he started each client relationship by mentally acknowledging, this client might leave someday. All clients eventually do. My job is to provide excellent service while they're here, not to desperately cling to them forever. This shift made Michael much more effective. He could have honest conversations about pricing, set appropriate boundaries, and focus on long-term value rather than short-term appeasement. Ironically, this made him more valuable to his clients because he was giving them honest, strategic advice rather than just telling them what he thought they wanted to hear. The same principle applies to parenting. Parents who are terrified of their children experiencing any difficulty or disappointment often become overprotective and controlling, which actually harms their children's development. But parents who understand that their children will face challenges, make mistakes, and eventually become independent adults can love them fully while preparing them for reality. Jennifer, a mother of 2 in Phoenix, used to be consumed with anxiety about her children's safety and success. She'd hover over their homework, arrange their social lives, and try to shield them from any negative experiences. But after learning about healthy detachment, she realized she was trying to control things that were ultimately outside her control. She started mentally preparing, my children will face difficulties, make mistakes, and experience disappointments. This is how they learn and grow. My job is to love them, guide them, and trust them to handle their own lives. This shift made her a much more effective parent. Instead of anxiously micromanaging everything, she could provide guidance when needed while allowing her children to develop independence and resilience. Her kids responded better to a confident, trusting parent than to an anxious, controlling one. The key insight here is that healthy detachment doesn't mean caring less, it means caring more wisely. When you're not consumed with trying to control outcomes, you can focus on what you actually can control, your own actions, responses, and the quality of attention you bring to each moment. This also applies to material possessions. When you understand that your car, your house, your clothes, and your gadgets are all temporary, you can enjoy them without being defined by them. You take care of them appropriately, but you don't derive your identity or security from them. If they're damaged, stolen, or become obsolete, you're disappointed but not devastated because you never confused having them with being secure. The practical exercise is simple but profound. Regularly spend a few minutes contemplating the temporary nature of the things and people you care about most. This isn't morbid thinking, it's realistic thinking that leads to deeper appreciation and healthier relationships. But there's one more benefit of this practice that might be the most valuable of all for our anxiety-filled modern world. The fourth benefit, expecting the worst actually reduces anxiety. The fourth benefit of negative visualization is the most counterintuitive, but it might be the most powerful for our anxiety-ridden modern world. Expecting difficulties actually reduces anxiety rather than increasing it. This goes against everything our culture teaches us about positive thinking, but both ancient wisdom and modern neuroscience prove that strategic pessimism is one of the most effective anxiety treatments ever discovered. Here's why this works. Most anxiety comes from uncertainty and the fear of being caught unprepared. Your brain is constantly scanning for potential threats, and when it can't predict what might happen, it assumes the worst and keeps you in a state of hypervigilance. But when you deliberately and rationally consider potential difficulties ahead of time, you give your brain the certainty it craves, or not certainty that nothing bad will happen, but certainty that you're prepared for whatever does happen. Think about the difference between walking through a dark forest where you don't know what might be lurking versus walking through the same forest with a flashlight, a map, and knowledge of what animals live there. The second scenario isn't necessarily safer, but it's much less anxiety-provoking because you're prepared and informed rather than blindly hoping for the best. Dr. Julie Norham's research on defensive pessimism shows that people who mentally prepare for potential problems actually perform better and experience less anxiety than those who try to maintain positive expectations. The defensive pessimists aren't more negative or depressed. They're just more realistic about potential challenges and more prepared to handle them. Let me tell you about Kevin, a software engineer in San Francisco who used to have crippling anxiety before every product launch. He'd lie awake at night imagining all the things that could go wrong, but in a chaotic, unproductive way that just made him more anxious. But after learning about structured negative visualization, he started each project by systematically thinking through potential problems. The servers might crash under heavy load. We might discover bugs we didn't catch in testing. Some users might have trouble with the new interface, and we might need to roll back some features. Instead of increasing his anxiety, this structured preparation dramatically reduced it. He wasn't lying awake anymore because he'd already thought through the problems during his work hours and had plans for handling them. When issues did arise during launches, which they always did, Kevin was calm and effective because he'd already mentally rehearsed these scenarios. This is the key difference between productive negative visualization and destructive worry. Worry is repetitive, unstructured, and focused on problems without solutions. Negative visualization is deliberate, systematic, and focused on both problems and responses. Worry makes you feel helpless. Negative visualization makes you feel prepared. The Stoics understood that anxiety often comes from trying to control things that are outside your control. When you accept that some things will go wrong, because that's just how life works, you can focus your energy on what you can actually influence: your preparation, your responses, and your mindset. Consider the anxiety that comes from social situations. Many people are terrified of parties, networking events, or public speaking because they're afraid of being judged, saying something stupid, or being rejected. But what if you mentally prepared for these possibilities ahead of time? Sarah, a graphic designer in Chicago, used to avoid networking events because she was terrified of awkward conversations and potential rejection. But after learning about negative visualization, she started preparing differently. Some people at this event might not be interested in talking to me. I might have some awkward moments in conversations, and I might not make any meaningful connections tonight. That's just the nature of networking. Not every interaction is going to be perfect. This preparation transformed her experience. Instead of going to events hoping desperately that everything would go perfectly, she went expecting some awkwardness and rejection as normal parts of the process. When conversations didn't flow smoothly or people weren't interested in her work, she wasn't devastated because she'd expected this to happen sometimes. She could focus on the connections that did work rather than being destroyed by the ones that didn't. The same principle applies to medical appointments, job interviews, first dates, and any other situation that typically creates anxiety. When you expect some things to go wrong, not because you're pessimistic, but because you're realistic, you eliminate the shock and disappointment that usually trigger anxiety responses. But here's what makes this really powerful. When you're not anxious about potential problems, you actually handle them much more effectively when they occur. Anxiety narrows your thinking, makes you less creative, and triggers fight or flight responses that aren't helpful for most modern challenges. Calm preparation, on the other hand, keeps your thinking flexible and your responses strategic. Think about the difference between two people dealing with a flight delay. Person A, who expected everything to go smoothly, becomes immediately stressed and angry. They spend their energy complaining, demanding explanations, and making the situation worse for themselves and everyone around them. Person B, who mentally prepared for possible delays, thinks, "There's the delay I knew might happen. Now, what are my options?" They calmly explore alternatives, make necessary phone calls, and might even use the unexpected time productively. The Stoics also realized that this kind of preparation creates what they called the discipline of desire, the ability to remain tranquil regardless of circumstances. When you're not constantly surprised by life's inevitable difficulties, you develop a steady, unshakable calm that becomes your default state rather than something you have to work to achieve. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Negative visualization is the practical application of this principle. You can't control whether your flight gets delayed, your presentation goes perfectly, or your date finds you attractive. But you can control whether you're mentally prepared for these possibilities and how you respond when they occur. This preparation also helps with what psychologists call catastrophic thinking, the tendency to assume that any negative event will lead to disaster. When you regularly practice negative visualization, you realize that most difficulties are manageable inconveniences rather than catastrophes. You've mentally rehearsed handling them so they don't seem as threatening. Take Lisa, a teacher in Miami who used to panic whenever she had to deal with difficult parents. She'd imagine worst-case scenarios where parents would complain to the principal, demand she be fired, or cause major disruptions. But after practicing structured negative visualization, she started preparing more realistically. This parent might be upset about their child's grade. They might question my teaching methods, and they might be difficult to work with. But I can listen to their concerns, explain my reasoning, and work towards solutions. This preparation made her much more effective in parent conferences. Instead of being defensive and anxious, She could listen calmly and respond professionally because she'd already mentally prepared for criticism and disagreement as normal parts of her job. The practical application is simple but requires discipline. Before any situation that typically makes you anxious, spend a few minutes systematically thinking through what might go wrong and how you'd handle each possibility. Don't dwell on these thoughts or let them spiral into worry. Just acknowledge them. Consider your responses and then move forward with confidence. This practice literally rewires your brain over time. Instead of seeing potential problems as threats to avoid, you start seeing them as challenges you're prepared to handle. Your baseline anxiety decreases because you're no longer constantly afraid of being caught off guard. But there's one crucial warning that every Stoic master would give you about this practice, and ignoring it could turn this powerful tool into a source of obsession and fear. The only warning Marcus Aurelius would give you. If Marcus Aurelius could sit down with you today, there's one crucial warning he'd give you about negative visualization. Moderation is everything. This powerful practice can transform your life, but like any tool, it can be misused. The difference between wisdom and obsession is the difference between preparation and worry. The Stoics weren't trying to become paranoid or fearful. They were trying to become unshakable. There's a fine line between mentally preparing for difficulties and becoming consumed by them. Marcus Aurelius spent a few minutes each morning preparing his mind, then moved on with his day. He didn't spend hours obsessing over every possible catastrophe. Here's how to know if you're doing it right. Negative visualization should make you feel more calm and prepared, not more anxious and fearful. If you find yourself constantly imagining worst-case scenarios, unable to enjoy the present moment, or becoming paralyzed by all the things that could go wrong, you've crossed the line from Stoic preparation into destructive worry. The key is what Seneca called rational thinking versus harboring fear. When you practice negative visualization correctly, you're using your rational mind to prepare for realistic possibilities. When you're doing it wrong, you're feeding irrational fears and creating anxiety where none existed before. Think of it like physical exercise. The right amount makes you stronger and healthier. Too much can injure you and set you back. The Stoics recommended brief, occasional reminders of life's uncertainties, not constant dwelling on everything that could go wrong. Remember David, the financial advisor who learned to prepare for market volatility? He spent 5 minutes each Monday morning acknowledging that the market might be turbulent that week. He didn't spend all day, every day, imagining financial disasters. That brief preparation gave him the mental armor he needed without consuming his life with worry. The goal of this ancient practice isn't to make you expect the worst from life. It's to help you handle whatever life brings with grace, wisdom, and unshakable inner peace. When you're prepared for difficulties, you can fully appreciate the good times. When you understand that challenges are temporary, you can navigate them without losing your center. You now have the same tools that helped Marcus Aurelius rule an empire, that gave Epictetus strength through slavery and freedom, and that have helped countless people find tranquility in chaos. The morning routine that prepares you for difficult people. The daily practice that helps you handle everyday chaos. The mindset shifts that transform how you see every experience. The coping methods that prevent panic. The perspective that changes everything. The love that can't be destroyed. And the preparation that eliminates anxiety. These aren't just ancient ideas. They're practical tools you can start using today. Tomorrow morning, spend 2 minutes preparing your mind for the day ahead. not with positive affirmations that ignore reality, but with realistic preparation that acknowledges life's true nature. If this ancient wisdom has helped you see life differently, subscribe to Stoic Vivu for more practical philosophy that actually works in the modern world. Like this video if you're ready to build unshakable inner peace, and share it with someone who needs these timeless tools for handling life's inevitable challenges.